So the other day I got an email from a client, well, I should say they weren't a client at the time. I got an email from someone who found me online after seeing the reviews that we had online, and they had the question of, what are my different choices in terms of who I can work with to get a mortgage? Because, there seem to be a lot of options. I could call my bank, I could walk into a credit union, I can call mortgage brokers. What's the differences between all of these other resources out there? So I figured it was an important enough question and a really excellent question, honestly, that it was worth making a video. So I can post this up on my blog and just share it with people who, I think this would be relevant to. So if you're watching this, it's either because you found us looking for the answer to this question online, or we thought it would be valuable to share with you. The question, is who are my different choices of who I can get a loan from? And really, I can simplify it into three different categories. And in the central Iowa area, there's probably over 100 people who are in the mortgage business who can do a loan for you that will, without a doubt, fall into one of these three categories. And if you have a question of, what category does this person fall into, just ask and we can help you figure out what bucket they'd fit into. But really quickly, let me explain those three different categories of people that you can speak with about getting a mortgage and really just kind of drill down into the quick pros and cons of each category. So the first one is banks and credit unions. And the way you're working with a bank or a credit union is you're going to walk into a bank branch or a credit union branch where they have an ATM on site. They'll have teller line of people that can make deposits into accounts. A bank or credit union is fundamentally not a mortgage operation. It's really there for a consumer services standpoint. So the reason they oftentimes are in the mortgage business is to get that depository relationship with you. They want to have an ongoing communication with you, which isn't a bad thing. The reason I really like banks and credit unions is they do everything in-house. So from start to finish, soup to nuts, everything's going to be done in one company. Not necessarily within that particular office, but within that company, they do everything, start to finish, which I was always very envious in a prior life, which I'll explain in a little bit. But that's really a huge advantage with banks and credit unions. And the other thing that I found is that banks, in a lot of cases, because they have a lot of federal regulations and equal lending and that kind of thing, they will tend to lend borrowers a little bit lower credit score range. So if you're someone who falls outside of the area of what the other two categories can help you, there are some banks and credit unions who can make in-house loans to make that possible for those people. The disadvantage in working with a bank or credit union, though, is they usually only have one outlet for money. So they don't want to sell a loan to someone who's going to solicit their banking business. So they really do try to service and hold everything in-house, which if you really love your bank and you don't care about the details of what you get on your loan, it's not such a bad deal. But if you're wanting to obtain the best interest rate you possibly can with the lowest cost and that kind of thing, banks and credit unions oftentimes are just tied to what their in-house rates are. Not to say that they're always high, but what I will tell you, and this is a dirty trick from one of the high-level managers at a local bank that I was talking with, it's a friend of mine, when business gets busy, the way that they control that is they raise interest rates, because the only way that they can really stop the salespeople, which is like what I do, is they have to raise the rates so they're no longer the leading or competing offer for getting a mortgage. And a lot of times people find that out when it's too late. And the only time you know that you've picked the wrong person in a lot of cases is when it's too late into the process. So banks and credit unions are the first outlet of where you can get money. The second outlet is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, and that's mortgage brokers. Now, you've probably heard about mortgage brokers. It used to be an extremely popular vehicle to get a mortgage. Mortgage brokers, the way you're working with a mortgage broker is you're working with a person who will basically just act as a matchmaker between you and a bank. They don't underwrite the loan. They really, other than finding the best scenario for the client that pays them most fairly and finding a bank who can actually do the deal, that's really where their unique ability lies. And I was a mortgage broker for 4 or 5 years. So I'm very familiar with the process of being a mortgage broker. So the huge advantage, the pros, in working with a mortgage broker is because they have so many outlets for financing, oftentimes over 100, but don't let them fool you. They only work with maybe 5 of them. But out of those 5, it's whoever's willing to get the best deal for the customer and still yield the most profit for the broker. And the benefit is oftentimes it's very competitive with what the banks and credit unions will offer, and honestly the third category that I'll mention too. But the disadvantage in working with a mortgage broker, and the reason why I'm no longer a mortgage broker, is because as far as a control standpoint goes, it's very difficult to control the process for a loan originator like me, which to you, that means that the process tends to be a little less predictable, a little bit more broken, so to speak. So a lot of times the underwriters who will look at your loan and approve it, they're out on a coast, whether it be the East Coast, West Coast, and they are the ones underwriting your loan. So if you have a tricky deal or you've got some deposits that come up, or honestly, if they just don't like the appraisal, it can cause a lot of headache for you in making sure that you can close on time with no surprises, but also the mortgage professional, because they have to jump through all the hoops the lender dictates they have to jump through. So that's kind of the pros and cons of a mortgage broker. The third category, which a lot of people don't even realize it really exists, a lot of people confuse this third category with mortgage brokers, is the term correspondent bankers. And what correspondent bankers are is the best way to explain them, now that you know what a bank and credit union is and a mortgage broker is it's kind of a hybrid between the two. Which is why I ended up transitioning into this field of the mortgage business when I realized how smoothly it really works. So the way you know you're working with a correspondent banker is you've got a company who's going to take your loan from start to finish within their own company. So they'll underwrite it, they'll approve it, they'll close it, they'll even fund the loan in their own name. But ultimately the loan will be serviced by a much larger company who's interested in the actual servicing side of the business. And that's called correspondent banking. So the advantages of working with a correspondent banker are the in-house underwriting, which is fantastic because we know all the people that are going to touch your file, the competitive rates and pricing because we have so many outlets. We have, I think, 21 different banks that we sell loans to on any given day, and that doesn't even consider what we can broker because we can still broker. But the correspondent banking side is very competitive in terms of rate and cost, which is fantastic for you. But then also it's just a lot of times they're more efficient because they're smaller companies than the banks and credit unions. So although they have in-house underwriting, which again I was always really jealous about as a broker, being a correspondent banker, generally speaking, and I'm generalizing, but I'm trying to get you the facts here so you can make an informed decision. As a correspondent banking operation like ours, Fairway, we actually have a very efficient underwriting process. We just closed a loan last week in like 12 days, start to finish, and that was a purchase. Try to get that done at a local bank, and I think you'd really have a difficult time doing it in anything less than twice that amount of time. So those are the big advantages. To be fair, though, I've kind of told you why our competitors, now have a downside. Our downside is that we don't necessarily know who's going to service your loan at the time that we lock it if you want to go with the best interest rate possible. And the reason why that is because when, a few years back we had salespeople, which is what I do, and we were out in market saying, hey, we can lock you with ABC Bank. I'm not going to say the bank, but ABC Bank at this rate. And then that customer banked with ABC Bank, so they went directly to the bank and said, hey, what can you do for me? I've got a guy who says that he can do a loan with you guys for this rate. And then the banker said, well, we can't even touch that. That's not even possible. And then it created a lot of friction because we depend on those banks to buy the loans from us for servicing purposes after the loan closes. And it's not good business when you're out on the street fighting for the same business and you're using their name as a kind of hold to get the deal. So since then we have several banks that we work with, but if you're looking for the absolute best interest rate, they always kind of put a curtain in front of it so we don't know who it is until it gets transferred and sold. The other reason is we always have to have 2 lenders that we can sell a loan to, because if for some reason one lender doesn't want to buy it, we have a backup. So now you know way more information than you ever wanted to know. But so those are really the pros and cons of both sides of things, I guess. And I hope it just helps you have a better perspective of what all goes into this process. Whether you call a mortgage company that's inside a bank or credit union or a broker or correspondent banker, you know the good and bad. My advice personally is to contact at least 2 different mortgage professionals, if not 3. Talk with them, have a really good conversation to get a feel for what makes them unique, and hopefully they'll give you an indication of what that is when you talk with them. And just go with your gut on who's the best fit. What we found with our clients is a lot of our clients are referred to us from people we've worked with before. We always suggest they get a second opinion, because until they hear from someone else and their approach, they don't really understand what makes us different. So other people really help us reinforce what we could have said without having to say it, if that makes sense. And the other thing that I recommend you do, and I always recommend this whether you're looking for a mortgage company, a realtor, or I've got a nightmare story of a deck stain person. We had to get our deck re-stained at my personal home, and it was a disaster. Google whoever you're talking to and see what you can find out about them online. If I would have taken my own advice in that deck stain situation, I would have avoided a lot of headache and wasted time and a guy jumping my fence. So a lot of really interesting stories there, but if you Google the people you're considering, I think you'll be really surprised in what you can learn just by Googling them and looking at the online reviews. We've got a lot of really generous past clients who've left us raving fan reviews online, and we really appreciate that, and we hope you take an opportunity to check that out as well. So if you have any questions that we can help out with about the loan process, because again, it depends on how you find us to see this video. If this is your first time meeting me and our business, please just send me a quick email. My email address is tyler@tylerosbyteam.com. You can also go to our online application, which is applywithtyler.com, if you'd like to get pre-approved for a mortgage. Just keep in mind we're only licensed in the state of Iowa for our branch personally, but we do have other mortgage professionals all over the country that we could refer you to if you're looking for help on buying a house or refinancing a house. So anyway, I hope this message helps you in your process of making a decision on who to work with. There is no right and wrong answer. I can firmly say that. But now that you know some of the details and differences between all these different resources, you can get a better feel for who you should be talking with. And then, again, find 2 or 3 people in that category, or maybe you interview all 3 categories, but just figure out what your gut feeling is and experiences and kind of running numbers and seeing what's possible. Okay? So thanks again for tuning in, and reach out if you need anything at all. We're here to help. Thanks.